Your worth isn't defined by someone's inability to see it. It's easy to forget that when you're in the aftermath of a failed relationship, especially one where you gave everything, your time, your heart, your energy, and still it wasn't enough for them to stay, or worse, to even recognize what they had. You begin to analyze every little thing, replaying moments over and over in your mind, trying to find where you went wrong. But what if you didn't go wrong? What if the problem wasn't you, but their ability to recognize what was right in front of them? There are people who are emotionally unavailable, people who are still wounded, people who are looking for control or validation rather than connection. And when they come across someone real, someone genuine, someone who offers love that isn't performative, it scares them. It exposes their own inability to reciprocate. So they pull back, they push you away, they make you feel like you were too much, when in truth you were just too real for where they were in life. You have to understand that your value doesn't decrease based on someone's temporary perspective. Just because someone couldn't hold what you offered doesn't mean what you offered wasn't powerful. Some people simply don't have the capacity to meet you at your level, and that's not an indictment of your worth. It's a reflection of their readiness or lack thereof. You were willing, you were honest, you were open. That alone puts you ahead of so many people pretending to be ready for love while still running from their own reflection. The moment you stop looking for validation from someone who couldn't value you is the moment you begin to reclaim your strength. Your job is not to become smaller so someone else can feel bigger. Your job is not to convince someone to love you. Love isn't begged for, it's recognized. And if someone missed it, that's their loss. Tie your self-esteem to their blindness. Tie it to your truth, your growth, your ability to still show up with an open heart even after being hurt. That is strength, that is beauty, that is worth. And no one gets to define it for you. Rejection often feels personal. It cuts deep, especially when you've shown up with honesty, vulnerability, and care. You begin to wonder if you were lacking something, if you could have done more, said less, been different somehow. But here's the truth. Most of the time, rejection is not about you at all. It's about where the other person is in their own life, emotionally, mentally, even spiritually. Their choice to walk away or not choose you is more often a reflection of their limitations than any flaw in you. We assume that rejection equals failure, that it's proof we weren't good enough. But sometimes rejection is just someone admitting, consciously or not, that they can't meet your depth, your consistency, or your authenticity. When someone lacks emotional maturity, they will reject the very thing they claim to want. They'll say they want love, loyalty, stability, but when it shows up, they panic because those things require showing up in return. And not everyone is ready to do that. So rather than stepping into growth, they step away. And when they do, we internalize it. We wear it like a wound and call it truth. But their inability to rise to the occasion isn't an indictment of your worth. It's a mirror of where they are in their own journey. Sometimes people walk away because staying would require them to change, to confront themselves, to stop hiding behind distractions or shallow connections. And you simply became a mirror they weren't ready to look into. That doesn't mean you were wrong to offer love. It means they weren't ready to receive it in the form you were giving it. And that's not your fault. You can't force someone to grow. You can't drag someone into emotional readiness. All you can do is keep showing up as who you are and let the wrong ones fall away. Rejection, painful as it is often divine redirection. It protects you from a future filler. D, with one-sided effort and unmet needs. It clears the space for someone who sees you clearly, someone whose capacity matches your heart. But to make room for that, you have to stop questioning your worth every time someone says no. Their no doesn't diminish your value. It simply confirms that they weren't capable of appreciating what you had to give. And in that truth, there's freedom. You were showing up with love. He wasn't ready to receive it. That truth alone can be both devastating and liberating. You poured yourself into someone, offered presence, honesty, kindness, and emotional safety, and still found yourself standing in the ruins of something that never became what it could have been. But not all love is rejected because it's wrong. Sometimes it's rejected because it requires someone to rise to a level they're not ready for. When someone hasn't done the inner work, when they're still healing wounds they won't admit they carry, they will often push away the very thing they secretly crave. They don't reject you because you were too loving. They reject you because they weren't capable of receiving real love without feeling exposed or inadequate. When you come with openness and consistency, it highlights everything they're avoiding in themselves. Your willingness to communicate clearly reminds them of their own emotional distance. Your loyalty shines a light on their fear of commitment, and your vulnerability, your desire for depth, makes them feel like they have to be someone they're not prepared to become. So rather than meet you there, they create distance, they ghost, they give mixed signals, they keep you close enough to feel wanted, but far enough to avoid responsibility. It leaves you confused, questioning if your love was the problem, but it wasn't. You weren't asking for too much. You were just offering what they weren't ready to hold. That's not on you. That's on their readiness, their maturity, and their willingness to grow. Love doesn't just require emotion. It requires effort. It requires capacity. And not everyone has that. Some people want the idea of love more than the reality of it. They want affection without accountability, attention without emotional investment. But you showed up with the real thing. You weren't playing game. You weren't performing. You were there, fully present. And that alone is something to be proud of. So don't shrink yourself because someone wasn't prepared to meet your love with the same level of truth. You didn't lose because you cared too deeply. You stood in your power. And if they couldn't receive that love, it's not a reflection of your failure. It's a sign that you're ahead of them in growth, in readiness, in courage. Let that be enough to let go. Stop internalizing someone else's emotional unavailability. Their inability to open up, to be consistent, or to commit does not mean you are unworthy of love. Yet that's exactly what happens when we're hurt by someone who couldn't meet us emotionally. We take it on as our fault. We tell ourselves we were too intense, too sensitive, too demanding, too something. We replay every conversation, every reaction, searching for the moment we push them away. But more often than not, the truth is simple and far less dramatic. They were emotionally unavailable long before you showed up. And no matter how kind, patient, or loving you were, it was never going to be enough to fix that. People who are emotionally unavailable often operate from fear of vulnerability, fear of losing control, fear of being truly seen. So they keep their walls up. They avoid direct communication. They sabotage intimacy the moment it starts to feel real. They might even say all the right things, but their actions never align. And when you're emotionally available, when you offer connection and ask for depth, you begin to feel that gap, that emotional distance that never quite closes no matter how much effort you put in. Instead of recognizing that gap as a reflection of their inner struggle, you may start blaming yourself for not being easy enough to love. But you cannot carry someone else's emotional limitations and call it self-awareness. It's not your job to shrink or to decode mixed signals. It's not your role to rescue someone from their own walls. Their avoidance isn't about you. It's about what they haven't healed, what they refuse to confront, what they're afraid to feel. You could be the most loving, grounded, emotionally intelligent person in the world, and it still wouldn't be enough to make them available. The danger in internalizing their behavior is that it starts to erode your self-esteem. You begin to think that love must always feel like effort, that closeness always comes with confusion, that longing is normal. But healthy love is clear. It doesn't keep you guessing. And you deserve that kind of love, not because you've earned it through suffering, but because it's what you were always worthy of. So stop rewriting yourself to fit into someone else's emotional absence. Start honoring the space you made for connection, even if they weren't ready to step into it. The right person values you without needing to be convinced. You won't have to chase over-explain, or constantly prove your worth to someone who truly sees you. In a world where so many relationships are built on uncertainty and mixed signals, it's easy to fall into the trap of believing that love has to be earned, that you need to perform or adapt just to be accepted. But real connection doesn't require a performance. It simply requires presence. When someone is aligned with you emotionally, mentally, and spiritually, they don't second guess your intentions, and they don't make you question theirs. They don't treat you like a backup plan, a maybe, or a temporary comfort. They recognize your value and respond to it with clarity. With the wrong person, it can feel like you're always trying to measure up. You become hyper-aware of your words, your timing, your tone. You wonder if texting too soon or sharing too much will scare them away. You walk on emotional eggshells because you're hoping somewhere deep down they'll finally choose you. But the moment you're trying to convince someone to stay is the moment you've already sacrificed part of your peace. You should never have to fight to be seen in a space that's meant for mutual growth and safety. The right person doesn't make you beg for consistency. They don't disappear when things get deep or uncomfortable. They lean in. They ask questions. They listen. They match your energy, not out of obligation, but because they value your presence. There is no scoreboard in their mind. They're not weighing what they give against what they get. They're just present, grateful, and intentional. And most importantly, they don't confuse your emotional availability for weakness. They understand that your vulnerability is strength, that your willingness to care is not something to exploit, but something to protect. They honor your openness because they're not afraid of it. They're ready for it. So stop trying to prove your worth to those who can't even see it. The ones who matter will recognize your value effortlessly. And when that happens, love stops feeling like a battle and starts feeling like a home. You are not meant to convince someone to choose you. You are meant to be chosen by someone who already knows. Healing starts when you stop blaming yourself for their choices. For too long, you've carried the weight of someone else's actions as if they were your fault, as if their inability to stay, to love you properly, or to choose you was somehow a reflection of your shortcomings. But healing doesn't come from reanalyzing every moment, every word you said, or every emotion you felt. It comes from finally accepting that their behavior was their responsibility. Their emotional immaturity, inconsistency, or avoidance didn't begin with you, and it wouldn't have changed no matter how differently you showed up. You can be the most loyal, understanding, loving person and still not be enough for someone who's committed to their own patterns of avoidance or dysfunction. People make choices from their own level of awareness. Some choose distance because closeness scares them. Some choose to manipulate or push you away because they confuse love with control. And some simply choose not to show up at all, not because of anything lacking in you, but because they weren't willing to do the work required to love someone fully. The problem is, when you're someone who feels deeply, you tend to absorb the silence, the rejection, the inconsistency, and make it mean something about you. You begin to wonder if maybe you loved too hard or expected too much. But real healing is when you stop asking what you could have done differently and start acknowledging what they failed to do. Healing is when you stop rewriting yourself to match their story and start rewriting the story itself. It's okay to grieve what could have been. It's okay to feel the loss, but don't let it turn into self-blame. You didn't make them unavailable. You didn't cause them to walk away. And it's not your job to make sense of their chaos. Your only responsibility is to yourself, to your peace, to your growth, to your own emotion, our safety. Every time you choose to forgive yourself for believing you weren't enough, you take a step toward wholeness. Healing begins when you realize you never had control over their choices, only your response to them. And the most powerful response you can give is this: I choose to stop carrying what was never mine. Their decisions are not my burden. My healing is